And the organizer of the panel was Helle Merete Brix, a Danish journalist who started a Lars Vilks solidarity committee to support Lars Vilks, who was one of the cartoonists who drew Mohammed and is since under death threats. And that's one of the things you did. You interviewed a lot of people. You have a long career in journalism, and now you're concentrating more on terror victims in general. Is that right? So I ask you to please welcome our speakers. Agnieszka will first give her presentation and afterwards Helle, and then we can ask questions.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this event. I'm Helle Merete, among friends, and I will speak about women, freedom, Islam and terrorism. When I was asked to join this conference, I immediately said yes. It's an important debate. I think it's also important for women in Europe today to understand that if you don't stand up for your rights, you might lose them. But I also wondered if I was the right person to talk about the freedom of women. I don't consider myself a feminist. I think it's truer to say that my interest lies in the rights of the individual, and that I naturally think that men and women should have the same rights, the same opportunities. During the last 17 years, my main concerns have centered on three issues: the advance of Islam in the West, terrorism, and the defense of free speech. I've spoken and written about all three, and of course, they're all connected. And also, you can't look at the advance of Islam in the West without feeling concerned for women's rights. What happened in Cologne, what has happened in Innsbruck, in Swedish cities, in Danish cities, so many other places in Europe, should actually come as no surprise. For many years in Europe, a patriarchal Middle Eastern African culture has grown. Up until now, it has mostly targeted the Muslim women and the Muslim girls. We know it. We know about the social control, the violence, and the murder. And we've also seen in the media when journalists, from time to time, a few of them, go out with hidden cameras and reveal what is said by supposedly moderate imams, what they say in the mosque about women having no right to divorce, and that the husband has a right to beat her if he thinks she doesn't fulfill her marital obligations. It was depressing to see the debate on what happened on New Year's Eve in Cologne in my own country, Denmark, a small country in Scandinavia. It was probably just as depressing in other countries. Many feminists, many self-styled feminists, fell over themselves in their eagerness to tell us with many examples that what had happened in Cologne was unimportant and just as likely to occur in non-Muslim areas at the hands of white European men. Of course, this should come as no surprise. I think that feminists have long failed to understand, for instance, also the significance of burqa and headscarf. They tend to look upon them as innocent symbols, but they're not. And also consider the appeals from feminist circles popping up from time to time that all women in Europe on a certain day should wear the hijab in solidarity with the Muslim women. I wonder then if the feminist thinks that we ought to let ourselves be circumcised also, in solidarity with the many Egyptian women. Wouldn't that be the next logical step? It doesn't make any sense at all. But most worrisome of all, I think, is that so many women refuse to understand what the influx of people coming in from Muslim countries will mean for the curtailment of their rights. It's important, of course, to underline that there are liberal-minded Muslims, and in the course of the years I've met quite a few of them. But we have to generalize if we are to understand what we are up against. We also have to define what we mean by liberal Muslims. For me, it means Muslims who are willing to let their daughters marry a non-Muslim without demanding that her future husband converts to Islam. This is where mainstream Islam has a problem. If we move on speaking about women's rights, about terrorism, it's really needless to say that Europe is facing a problem that we do not know how to handle. And of course, not only Europe, we see it in Turkey, United States, and so many other countries. For me, it's quite absurd that we protect our Christmas markets, our Jewish institutions, also an arrangement like this, where security is discreet, but I'm certain efficient, but at the same time, we're not ready to protect our borders. We have been told that the idea of a fort Europe is indecent, inhuman, but forts are sometimes necessary. As things are today, we have no idea who passes our borders, whether those that do wish us well or not. It has also been quite interesting for me to realize that many women seem to be much more concerned, at least in Denmark, with the sight of policemen with heavy weapons in the streets, much more concerned about this phenomenon than they are concerned about terrorism. My point is, I'm happy to have men with heavy weapons around me, as long as they wish me no harm. And of course I have personal reasons for having this viewpoint. As Agnieszka has already told you, 2 years ago, I and Agnieszka survived a terrorist attack in Copenhagen, where the jihadi Omar al-Hussein tried to shoot his way into a debate on art, blasphemy and free speech, which I had organized together with some other people. It was taking place in a theater called the Powder Box. One of the people taking part was the Swedish art historian Lars Vilks, because Lars Vilks is not only a Mohammed cartoonist and an artist, he is also an art historian with a doctorate in modern theory of art. In the winter of 2012, I and 7 other people founded a support network for Lars Vilks. We were inspired to do so by reading the wonderful autobiography by Salman Rushdie. In the book, he tells how important it was for him during these hard works round the fatwa in 1989 that there were people standing up for him and supporting him. And being a Mohammed cartoonist in Sweden, I consider Sweden to be the East Europe of Scandinavia. Being a Mohammed cartoonist in Sweden was not an easy task. And Lars Vilks himself is a gentle Swedish intellectual coming from the Swedish left wing. It didn't help him at all. There was absolutely no support from him, except for a few people in the public debate in Sweden. Of course, we also know that Lars Vilks was the main target that day. I will tell you a little bit about the terror attack, not to make it too abstract. Omar al-Hussein shot and killed a film producer who was one of the people participating in this debate. He came from the left wing. I didn't know him personally, but he came to several of our debates and he was very shocked what happened to Charlie Hebdo, and he was very interested in this debate. He was shot outside the building. A lot of people flew out when the shooting started. If there hadn't been security people at the meeting, there were people from the Swedish police, there were policemen from the Danish police intelligence service, seven of them all together. Had they not been there, Agnieszka and I might not have been alive today. We know that the terrorist was on his way into the lobby, and he was only stopped by bullets from these security people. And then he ran off, went on to a synagogue where he killed an unarmed guard, injured 2 policemen, and later that night or early in the morning next day, he himself was killed in a gun battle with the police. In the surrealistic time after the terror attack, nearly 2 years ago, one of the fine things that has happened is to get to know some of these policemen who were there that day a little better. I find them to be men possessing some of men's most important qualities. And of course I foremost speak about their protective instinct. We need men like that today. And also I should say that today Lars Vilks lives the Salman Rushdie way. He's being moved from safe house to safe house. But being Lars Vilks, who's quite an extraordinary person, he makes the best of it. A little anecdote, he had to have an operation made not so long ago. It was quite uncomplicated. What is complicated is if a high-risk target, as they are called in the police language, are to be smuggled into a hospital and nobody should know that it's Mr. Vilks going through surgery. And it happened the way that he was completely covered when he was driven to surgery. So he said to me, people probably thought it was somebody who had died, but maybe that would have been a greater shock if they knew that it was Mr. Vilks lying under there. So lots of things, you go about your daily business, you have to do them in a certain way when you're protected round the clock. Agnieszka has said a little bit about Charlie Hebdo. Of course, it was a great shock for us in the Lars Vilks committee when we heard the news. In September 2014, we had presented Charlie Hebdo with the Lars Vilks Award for Art and Freedom of Speech. We have also given it to Agnieszka and Mariana and other good people from Passion for Freedom. And this day with Charlie Hebdo was a wonderful day, made even better by the fact that the ceremony took place in a wonderful DECA, the Danish Writers Association in Copenhagen. We had dinner afterwards, and Charlie Hebdo said to Lars Vilks, "Come and visit us in Paris, but come on a Wednesday. It's the only day when the editorial staff are there together." And of course, we all know what happened on one of those Wednesdays 4 months later. Shirabiar survived the attack on the 7th of January 2015 because he was on holiday in London. Many of his colleagues weren't so lucky, but how brave these people were. Today I'm no longer a member of the Lars Vilks committee. I have handed it over to someone else, and I spend time at the moment traveling around interviewing victims of terrorism. I speak to their relatives, I speak to survivors, and I plan to publish a book about all these meetings in the beginning of 2018. Some people think it must be very depressing doing this kind of job, but actually it's not. You meet quite a lot of wonderful people working in organizations that support victims of terrorism, people who quite often have a very personal motivation for doing this job. They have lost a father, a mother, a son or a daughter, or they have survived an attack. One of the people I've met is Aurelia, who survived the terrorist attack on Bataclan in 2015. She told me about that day, how she and a group of people saved their lives, some of them wounded, when they took refuge from the gunfire in a little room and barricaded the door as best they could. From there they could hear what was going on in the hall. They could also hear when the shots that started haphazardly grew more methodical. Some young men in the group said they knew why, and they were right. The terrorists were beginning to execute people by shooting them in the head. "Don't look down," said the policeman, who finally arrived on the scene and led Aurelia and her group to safety. But there were 2 very young people in the group, and Aurelia persuaded the policeman to let them keep their eyes tightly closed and hold her hand as they walked through the hall, which meant, of course, that she had to keep her own eyes open and was not forced to see, like she put it to me, what no civilian person should ever see. And what she mostly remembers from that day is this: the sight of all the dead young women lying on the hall floor, the smell of blood. Not to depress anyone in this theatre, let me cheer you up a little bit by saying I have always also less dramatic meetings in these years. Lars Vilks and I are naturally good friends in private. We meet now and again. At the moment we are working on a play featuring a cartoonist, a caliph and a dog. "Do you think it will ever be staged?" Lars Vilks asked me the last time we met to discuss the project in a Danish cafe. And of course, he has always bodyguards with him. Well, it certainly won't be easy, but where there is a will, there's a way. Earlier this year, my co-founder of the Lars Vilks committee, an artist called Uwe Max Jensen, and I published a book about Lars Vilks. It's the first book about him. We thought that now is the time. It was not very easy to find a publisher, but we found a Norwegian publisher who, without batting an eyelid, said that the book should of course include the famous picture of the roundabout dog. Another important project for me has been to publish a book about the terrorist attack in Copenhagen. It's a personal account, but I think it's also important to document how does society react, what is being said, what is not being said, what are the taboos left, and so on and so on. The title came easy. It's called God and the Prophet Don't Forgive. It came from a death threat that was sent from France the day after the attack. The angry Muslim who sent it wanted me and Uwe Max assassinated in the year 2015. And Uwe was quite worried. So New Year's Eve 2015, I texted him and said, Uwe, you see, we are still alive. And he said, yes, but Helle, the Islamic calendar is different. So we have to still be worried. But we're still going strong. And this is about writing. I'm a writer. I've also written about my childhood, other things that have been dramatic in my life. I always take to writing in difficult periods of my life. But again, this was also to document what happened, what was being said, what were the reactions in private, in public. And I think, as Agnieszka has also said, it's so important for us, whether we are men or women, to keep on saying and writing what we mean. About Islam, about immigration, about freedom of speech, so on and so on. But I think it's also important to talk openly of our fear. It's important also to remember what makes us happy, what makes us laugh, what gives our life meaning. And I will end by saying that I speak and understand some German, and a lot is being said today by Henrik Broder, who I must say was our distinguished guest at the Lars Vilks committee in 2014. So I'm really happy to meet Henrik Broder and his cute little dog here today. I'm fond of dogs. But I think what is really important for especially women to understand when we look at how women vote in elections, it is simply to understand that if we do not protect our borders, if there's not a very strict control who is coming in from the Muslim countries, I think there's no other way to put it, we cannot be sure that freedom in Europe will prevail. And without freedom, there will be no freedom for women living in a continent where we have all these wonderful opportunities. Thank you.